All right, so I'm going to do the intro. This part obviously is going to be cut out. Um, all right, everybody. So we have our monthly special again. Last month we had Nick Sigelski. This month we have Ethan Parker. He's VP of Revenue at AltiSales. A little bit more background. He's been in enterprise SaaS sales for 10 plus years. He specializes in the outbound motion. And I know I talk a lot about inbound, but a lot of his knowledge is really transferable to the inbound stuff, doing demos, discovery, follow-ups, etc. He's also the head of Outbound Squad and works with hundreds of reps on a weekly basis. So I'm really excited that he's on here. And I know a lot of people say that they're really excited that they have a guest, but I'm really excited because I chatted with him in the past. He was on one of my workshops, and what he has to say really matters. So today's topic, we're going to talk about, or Ethan's really going to talk about, is digging into pain and connecting that to priority. So I'll let him expound upon it. I set a 20-minute timer because I want to stay true to the 20-minute mark for the digestible episodes. So Ethan, take it away.
Yeah, appreciate that more. Happy to be here. So the whole digging into pain and connecting to the customer's priorities is probably the biggest disconnect, right? That I see in discovery. Sometimes we get some very surface level pain, or maybe even some bigger issues that are can be quantifiable, but we still haven't connected that to. There's a reason why they're not fixing that right now. Like there's always a reason, and usually that reason is it's not a priority and something else is. And I don't know if there's actually any other any other reason other than it's not a priority. It's usually not, we don't have the funds to take care of this problem. And, to zoom out a little bit and talk about how we get to this point in the conversation, it really starts with first, understanding what our customer is trying to do and aligning on expectations for this call. And when we do those two things first, we can then connect pain to the higher level initiative. So what I'm going to lay out today is a format that you can use, a framework that you can use for your discovery calls. This would be, for a first call. The process I'm going to discuss really takes 45 minutes if you're doing it well. So if you're scheduling 30-minute discoveries, that would be my first piece of advice, is start scheduling 45.
And this could be used, this framework could also be used not just for an outbound call, but also an inbound call. It's transferable, right?
100%. So on that note, before I go any further, in my experience, folks that master outbound sales absolutely blow everyone out of the water in inbound sales, because outbound is, in my opinion, is harder. People are at a different point in the buying cycle, but the benefit to it is we get to control the flow. So instead of you coming in consideration or an evaluation stage already, you're coming in with, I'm interested to learn more about this thing that you talk about. Don't know if I want it or not. So a lot of times when people come inbound, they've kind of already decided a budget. They've decided the use case, the scope, all of that. We have a chance to build that case for them in the outbound motion. However, if you use these tactics I'm talking about, sometimes, and just sometimes, because sometimes they're too far along in the inbound motion where that's decided, this is what we're doing. But sometimes you can influence, larger deal size, that kind of thing. So yeah, 100% transferable. So the framework, this is for the first call. But if you're demoing on the first call, Moore was on my podcast. We talked about demoing versus not demoing on the first call. Long story short, highly dependent on the product and what it is you're selling. But whether you're demoing or not, this framework would still work. And so essentially, it starts with understanding the three questions. And full disclosure, this is not an Ethan Parker original. This is a mixed match of lots of different trainings that I've had. Megan Mishak's a really big influencer in the stuff I'm about to say. Jordana Zeldin, Jason Bay, Nick and Armand, they're all big influencers, and where I've gathered Sandler training, whole lots of things. So it's a mixed match, and feel free to take this and make it your own. But from top to bottom, as I mentioned, it should take about 45 minutes. You could get most of this done in 30 minutes. So the three questions we have to answer: why change? Why you? Why now? Everyone knows this. What typically happens, especially when we look at inbound, because folks are already coming in knowing what they want to talk about, it gets really easy to get caught up in going exactly to that thing. Now, while I think there's value in showing them you're listening, but there's also a way that we can start to understand why it is they want to look at that thing and understand the deeper issues. So how we're going to open every call, This is something that Moore and I have slightly have a different opinion on, but I like to build a little rapport. I like to do a little, I call it real talk. That's a Charles Mulbauer thing, real talk over small talk. So also not a huge fan of like asking about the weather and those kind of things. But if I dug deep on you and I know that you like to go boating, for example, and this is a Tuesday morning, we're having this meeting, I might say something like, hey, Moore, you get out on the boat this weekend? And that's it. And watch him go in on that thing. He's like, oh, yeah, actually I did. Blah, 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 or this, that, and the other. No, I didn't, or whatever the case may be, because he's actually really passionate about that thing personally. And emotion drives decision. Logic justifies it. And if we can get this person like emotionally attached to us at the beginning of the call, it's a lot more productive the rest of the call, in my opinion. So, do a little homework, find out. It could be stuff about work history, like they transitioned from this industry to that industry. Ask them about how that was, what changed, what are the experience people like.
We also spoke about like doing the homework and the preparation, like beyond LinkedIn, like check out Instagram, check out, unless they're private, or maybe connect with them, Facebook. Beyond like the typical social platforms, is there any other place someone should do like homework?
I think that Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, those are all good. I mean, I'm always going to look at LinkedIn first. That's easiest, right? But beyond that, Twitter is probably the next best spot, and then from there, I would say Instagram, Facebook in that order. But in my experience, if they're very inactive on LinkedIn and Twitter, you're probably going to find a whole lot of nothing on the other two. But true. Sometimes you get lucky. If you don't have anything to go off of, the best thing to go off of would be work history. That's everyone's got that on a LinkedIn profile. They can at least talk to about that just a little bit. But anyway, once we do that, then we're going to move into an upfront contract. And this is something, especially in inbound, I see people skip all the time. No upfront contract. Just hop right into the thing. And it's not about this getting them to say yes or getting like there is a psychology of mini commitments for sure, like 100%, but it's not really the ultimate goal here. Really, the ultimate goal is to align on expectations, both for you and the prospect, because maybe you have something else in mind that like they don't give a shit about, and we need to figure that out, and we need to like make sure we're aligned on this conversation. Because if you're like most people, your product probably has 10 plus use cases, and you may have an idea of what you think that this person's looking for, but we don't really know that yet. We also don't know what's driving any of this. So it's important to align on expectations. So my upfront contract is going to sound something like, hey, Boar, thanks for your time again today. I have us down for a hard stop in 45 minutes. Is there any hard stop sooner than that I should be aware of? And right there, they'll generally tell you, no, I'm good. Or no, I actually have 15 extra minutes too, if we need it. And so that's always good to get that up front to know what type of time we're dealing with. Or let's say, yeah, I actually have a hard stop at the 30. Cool. So now I have 30 minutes to this chat instead of 45. Like that's super important to know right now and not 25 minutes in to your call. And what I do is what Moore just did too around setting a timer and staying true. I set a timer and it's going to go off 7 minutes before the end of my call. That's allotted for next steps. I don't wait until the end. Oh, I've got 2 minutes left. Let's go ahead and do this. Like there's a structure to the end of the call, just like there's
you tell them that you're going to do a timer, or it's just sort of you're just doing it on the background.
I just hit it and it goes off and everyone's like, whoa. But it's also a great, like snap you out of whatever zone you're in. Back into reality. Like it's, I've never found it to be unproductive, and usually they super appreciate it. Like, oh, wow, you're on it. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So that's what I do right there. Next, after we establish that, I'm gonna say, if this was outbound, I'd say something like, hey, I understand that we called you. Would it be helpful if I set some context? If it's inbound, you would say, hey, well, I know you reach out to us and you probably have something specific in mind. Would it help to kind of talk about what we usually cover in this call, and then we can go from there? So you might ask a question like that. So again, what you're doing here is you're demonstrating business acumen and helping them understand that like they have a lot going on and you're probably not their top priority. And you understand that, and you're here to make their life easier. You're demonstrating that from the very beginning. And you're also making this a very collaborative upfront contract. Notice the language I'm using. It's not like we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. Sound fair? And so they say, yeah, that sounds great, Ethan. Thanks. Cool. So typically what I talk about today more is how companies like XYZ and blah, blah, blah are doing blah, 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 blah. And from there, I thought it'd be helpful to, that's some Jordana Zeldin language, and that's super powerful. So from there, I thought it'd be helpful to talk a little bit about how whatever Zoom has helped drive some of these outcomes, right? Then together we can talk about whether it makes sense to dive in any further. So then together we can talk about whether it makes sense to dive in any further. And if so, we can talk concretely about next steps. If not, at least you'll have, at the very minimum, you'll have some insights you can take back and work on with the team. More, is there anything else you need to make sure that we cover today so this is worth your time. So I'm never going to say, sound good. Is this fair? Makes sense? None of that. More, is there anything else you'd like to cover today to make sure this is worth your time? What we did goes beyond just setting an upfront contract and aligning expectations. Like, we got this person very much tuned in to, because the tonality and the delivery of how we just delivered that, all that matters. And they're leaning in now. They're paying attention. It sounds a bit different than what they hear on a lot of sales calls. And it ends with an opportunity for them to insert, yes, I really came to you guys for this X reason, which is good for you to know. And if they don't know, it makes them feel like, okay, dude, this guy's done this a few times.
Yeah.
He'll be able to show me some things. Because like, people think that, like, salespeople, sometimes we get stuck in this paradigm of pursuer of the salesperson and the prospect being the one who's being pursued, and they get put up on this pedestal, and we're the lowly salesperson down here. And what we want to do is equal out and be peers really fast. That's what we want to do. And we do that by showing business acumen and just understanding, making their life easier, making this process easy for them, and being engaging. Like, if people are uninterested in you, it's because you're uninteresting. So get interesting.
Yeah.
Once we do upfront contract, go through that, then I usually start with roles and goals. And so that just is pretty something simple. Them say, hey, cool, more. I usually find it pretty helpful to start with just really quick introductions. Could you tell me a little bit more about your role and maybe 2 key goals over the next 2 years? And the reason why we ask that specific question, that specific way, is because, number one, like, tell me about your business is where a lot of people start. And like, I think that's just like the worst, the worst question to lead with. Like, you should know about their business. So I want to understand like your role, because whether it's VP of marketing or VP of sales, something basic like that every company has, all of them do a little bit different. They have a little bit differences in like what they're focused on, and asking that two key goals over the next 2 years is the important part. The 2-year time frame is the very important part. It helps to elevate this conversation out of surface level pain to like broader business initiatives. Because what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to pull out some of those broader business initiatives that we can then tie the pain and thing back to later in the call. So you're usually going to get a fairly surface level answer right there. Still, sometimes it's it's like a high level surface level answer, if that makes sense. Like, they'll tell you something broader. It is a bigger initiative, but it's not that deep. So we haven't really earned the right to dig in too much just yet, but we do want to ask a couple follow-up questions. So curious, what's driving that to be an area of focus right now? Cool. What specific goals do you have for that area of focus? How are you measuring that? How does your team impact that? Right. So we're smart questioning them really quick. And then we move on to a topic I call value drivers. And value drivers, that comes from Megan Mishiak as well. It sounds like this. So typically, we help companies in 3 ways, and you blah, blah, blah. And then you ask a few questions after that. The first one's the most important one in my experience. And that's, how does this compare to your own goals? So 2 important things here on the value drivers. They should not be sentences that start with we, us, or I. They should start with they. So they're looking to, they want to, they need to. And that's describing the companies that come to you. What this does, we got a little bit about their role and goals, a little bit. Hopefully we got to a high level a little bit there. Now what we're doing is we're priming them to think about this in a very specific way. That's what we're doing. We're psychologically priming them to think about our conversation in a specific way. And if they weren't thinking about this way already, now you're typically going to get 3 answers here. They're going to say something like, yeah, we're focused on all 3 of those things. Great. How do these compare to your own goals? Or they say, you know what, Ethan, that wasn't really what I was thinking about, but that's super interesting. I'd love to hear more about that. Perfect. We can talk about that for sure.
This is sort of like a question that you may have like an arbitrary answer to. Who knows, right? Like, what's the percentage of prospects that tell you, yeah, that's exactly what we're looking at, versus ones that say, no, not really?
Yeah, that's dependent on how well you know what problem you solve. So when this is really like tuned in and it's an inbound lead, almost 100% of folks are going to fall into the bucket of either, yep, we're focused on all 3 of those things, or interesting, I wasn't thinking about it in exactly that way, but I'd like to learn more about that. Those are going to be your 2 most common outcomes. If someone says, no, we're not interested in any of those 3 things, well, then you just DQ'd them and you can move on with your life. Yeah. That's the point.
Well, I feel like the one prior to the latter one where you're like, I haven't thought about that, but let's talk about that. I feel like those prospects end up becoming your customers because they're, don't want to say taking the bait because it's such a bad word to use, but like they're they're contributing, they're engaging, they're involved. They're like, all right, I want to learn more. They're in it to win it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would agree. Like that's my favorite answer is, oh, interesting. I wasn't thinking about it like that.
I
So I
love.
definitely have to unpack that some more.
I learned that from like the Challenger Sale, the book I read. It's I think it says something like you want to, if your call ends or if your prospect says like, I never thought about it that way, that's like a winning scenario. But yeah,
100%, 100%.
Cool.
100%. So that's the best possible outcome. Second best possible outcome is no, we're not worried about any of those three things right now. Cool. Well, I'll give you 30 minutes back, and it was nice to meet you.
Yeah.
We can't help. And not enough AEs do that. But anyway,
Yeah.
I digress from that subject. So after we list those out, we ask, how these compare to your own goals. They give an answer. If it's option A or option B, we would ask something like, maybe how do you prioritize those items? How do you prioritize those goals? And then this is also an opportunity to plug in what research you've done. So then after you kind of chat through that, you can say, cool, well, I saw more from a company level. Looks like you guys are focused on, expanding into your current client base and increasing revenue by whatever, 33% next year. Can you tell me more about that? Like it's just a very easy way for you to show them that you've done some more homework. And again, obviously this wouldn't be random information. This would be relative to like how you can help. So anyway, again, demonstrating business acumen and that we've been here, done this, and we have some insight we can share to help. And again, priming them. That's the most important part of this is we're priming them to think in a certain way. Like psychology is 90% of sales, in my opinion. So cool. We get through that. And then where it goes from here, we're still not going to talk about us. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about our customers and what their life generally looks like. And this could be a specific example. So this could be great. So what I'd like to do from here, I have about 6 minutes. I'm going to tell you about outreach.io and how they transformed their ABM campaigns starting back in 2016 up until where today, and kind of show you some of the steps they went through and some of the stuff they tested out and what they figured out during that time. Does that sound fair enough? Sweet. And then I'm going to go into that story. And when I tell that story, I'm going to pause strategically in places where I know I could ask a question. So I'm going to say something. Hey, more interested. Is this kind of, I know I haven't told you the whole thing yet, but how is this comparing to like where you're at in your journey on this right now? Right. So the story is obviously something they're here to talk about because they're at some point in this journey right now, and you just don't know where yet. And so we're going to find out where. And every step of the way, we're going to use a pause in a story to ask a little bit deeper and do a little bit more discovery. So we get to the end of that, and then we can talk about why you. And why you should really just be a very brief thing. If this is more enterprise complex sale, there shouldn't be a demo on this, in my opinion. Yeah, we should just explain very quickly, like, hey, cool, more. Well, we have 15 minutes left, so I don't really have time to do a demo today. But in short, obviously, we're the vendor of choice that help outreach with that. That's why I'm telling you the story. I would love to, unpack this a little bit more from our conversation today. Now I'm getting into the script of the outro of the call. From our conversation today, it seems like you guys are highly focused on increasing your ROAS on LinkedIn, reprioritizing your dollars so to be, a little bit lower click-through rates, and you want to tie in your marketing and outbound motion together so that you're working in more unison. Is that a fair assessment? Yeah, sweet, cool. So based on that, I see a strong opportunity for AdverTase to be helpful here. They're a client, so I know the script so well. So AdverTase to be helpful here. Would you agree it makes sense to take a deeper dive? Or would you agree it makes sense to take the next step? However you want to word that, whatever. Yes, sweet. On the next call, we'll talk a little bit about how you can get your marketing and sales team more aligned to really crank out your outbound function and, see as little as, 5 extra meetings per week to upwards of 20 extra meetings per week, depending on the size of your team. As well, we'll go into, exactly how this plugs into your current existing, ABM campaigns and maybe how we segment budget and blah, 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 blah. And so we're giving them agenda of the next call. Based on that agenda more, we typically include the VP of marketing and, whoever oversees like total ad spend. Would that be John and Jane on your team? So we've done our homework and we know who we want to talk to. We know who we're talking to now, and we know who else, what other stakeholders we want to get involved. And if you don't know that question, go to your sales manager and find out who are the stakeholders that are typically involved in the decision-making process. Yeah. And then know those people before you go into that call. Ask for them by name. Even if you're wrong, which you will be probably 75% of the time, because it's different at every organization, But what they will do now is they will then tell you who the right people are. Like, hey, no, John's not the right person. Jane is, but John won't be here. But, Jim over there in digital marketing, blah, 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 blah. He's the guy to bring into this conversation. Sweet. Let's get him involved. And then we get our calendars out and we book the meeting. And then we're not done yet. There's one more thing. Hey, more, just curious, what's going to happen between now and our next chat internally? And how can I help support you? Simple question that's so going to help you overcome getting ghosted or having things that happen internally, like, oh no, we're not looking at this or that and the other, because they know they're here looking at this and they know what their other folks are going to say. They know way better than you. They're going to go and somebody's going to be like, oh, nah, I hate that LinkedIn, this, that, and the other, blah, 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 blah. Like they know those things are going to come up. So ask that so and you can figure out a way to combat that and be proactive about it. And then you can say something like this. Great, more sounds good. So generally it's helpful for me to send a summary, maybe a quick video recap of this call today. So it's something you can share that's really bite-sized with the rest of the team to bring everyone up to speed before our next call. Does that sound like that'd be helpful? Yeah, Ethan, that would be amazing. Awesome. I'll get that sent over to you this afternoon. Anything else more? Great. Have a great day. And you just crushed the shit out of that discovery call.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wrote a lot of notes on this. So, all right, cool. So I have a couple of things that I wrote down. So it's from what I heard throughout this was, that was exactly 20 minutes, but I'm resetting the clocks just to have some extra buffer time. There are a couple of words that I plucked out. You've mentioned it, but the ones that I plucked out throughout the discovery that you'll use is typically, generally it's helpful, or generally we find it helpful, or generally companies or prospects or whatever it is find it helpful that, and so you're using that as a way to prime the prospect for what you're about to say.
Yeah. It just makes it less assumptive. Like it just communicates, hey, I don't know your situation, but typically other people like you are thinking about this.
Versus like, hey, here's what we're going to do. And then going into it and then be like, all right, cool. Sound good. And then they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. And they're just saying yes, because you've essentially force fed them the next steps.
Yeah. I mean, it all really goes to aligning on expectations every step of the way. So regardless of what I think, you're the person here to learn about this thing. So you can dictate to me. You're in control of this. And if I listed out my 3 ways that people generally are looking for help, and they say, kinda, but we actually have that, and they go to describe a super specific scenario. Well, guess what? I'm going to talk about that super specific scenario. Yeah. It's like, you are in charge here. If I can help with that thing, if it's something I can't help with, I'll tell you.
Yeah, something you mentioned also, like towards the end, talking about like for enterprise level deals that you typically won't do it won't be a one call demo, one call close, and there's more people involved. So I think that's what I was talking to you about in your podcast, where it's, if you're dealing with SMB, you could probably knock out a demo on that one discovery call, because it's such high volume and the sales cycle is a lot less than a 6 month to 12 months to maybe even 3-year sales cycle. So that's important to know. Like, for those that are listening that are an SMB where they're dealing with high volume deals, like, you can take enterprise level skill set and apply it to your SMB level deals. And on the flip side, if you're doing enterprise, you can take an SMB level skill set and apply it to enterprise. But enterprise is more of like a nurture, massaging type of skill set. I really liked what you said about like the next steps, where you're saying like, hey, we typically include, the VP of sales or whatever it is that so-and-so. And I think where AEs may fear doing that is if they're wrong because they didn't do the research or they just don't know, they avoid asking that question. But you said something really important. You're like, it's actually really good that you get it wrong, because nobody likes wrong. Like, people like to correct people and they'll say, no, it's actually this. And you've won. Like, you've nailed that part. I really like that part.
Yeah. Well, it just goes back to I think about myself. Okay. I'm VP of revenue. I get prospected to every day, all day long. And if I get on a call with you and you're asking me some really basic questions, and me as a sales leader, and I'm like, this is available on my LinkedIn, dude. You know the answer to that. Like, I'm very less inclined to help you out. But like, if I can see that you put in the work, you did the effort, and you labeled things, and you know things about me, you've shown me you know me in my world, I'm very willing to help you out. because
Yeah.
you've done a good job. And that's how everyone on the face of the planet feels. There's going to be 1% of human beings that are going to be assholes about it, not help you out. But like 99%, if you've done your homework and you show that you've put in the work to make their life easy, it's a law of reciprocity. It'll happen. They will
Yeah.
help you out.
That's really awesome. And then you at one point you were talking about like bringing up case studies. Are you bringing up case studies or of customers that are in the exact same vertical scenario that they're dealing with, or at more of a general case
Yeah.
study?
So typically what I coach teams on is to have 3 to 5 like stories you're ready to go with based on how that roles and goals and value drivers chat goes. So you should use that opportunity to uncover what they're thinking about those higher level initiatives. So then you can know what pain story to tell that connects to that priority. If you're a startup and you don't have, case studies or a bunch of customer examples, you can speak more broadly. You don't have to label a specific customer. You can speak more broadly about people in that industry, specifics or whatever. So the answer is both. It kind of depends on your seat and what resources you have at your company and how that chat goes. But yeah, if I have one that matches your industry, your specific situation, which a more established company almost always will, then I'm going to tell that story because that's going to relate most to what you're going through right now. Just the most important thing is the story is told from the customer standpoint. What didn't happen is that CEO or CRO or CMO wasn't sitting in a board meeting and like, oh my God, we have this massive problem and I need Advertise to fix this for me. Like, that's not what happened. They were like, hey man, we need to grow 33% next year. Like, how do we do this thing? Our ROAS is absolute dog shit. We're doing we're just wasting money over here. Like, that's the conversation that happened. So tell that story. Don't tell it from your rose-colored lenses. Like that's not what the customer relates to. They relate to other people's process, not yours.
Yeah. There was I think that there was something that you mentioned during discovery that AEs typically make the mistake. And you're really like emphasizing it where it's like, hey, it's not time to pitch at all yet. And I think that the mistake, and I think this happens a lot with like newbie AEs or newbie AEs to or non-newbies but new ones to a company, where they'll do some brief discovery and then they'll say something like, and even founders do this, oh, you'll notice that we actually have XYZ feature that does exactly what you're looking. They'll go into like the feature pitch and what they have, and I just cringe every time I hear that, because it's like, it's discovery. It's not pitch your product yet.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
That's not why people buy your thing. They don't buy it because of that feature. They buy it because of that priority they're trying to accomplish, and they understand the value of how your thing will help them with that. That's why they buy it. Period.
I think it's helpful. Like I like to get demoed on. I like when someone demos me on their product, because it's like when I used to be a waiter, right? And I'd then, after my shift, I would go to have dinner, and I'd go to a different restaurant. I'm like, wow, this is like what it's like to be a customer. And like, I can see the vantage point of the customer and the waiter, and I have just a different perspective. And so I like to do the same thing when it comes to like demos, where I'm getting demoed on. I get the lens of the customer. And so you're seeing things like, oh, wow, maybe I shouldn't say this, or I should say this. Cool, man. All right. We're about, what are we, a little over 20 minutes in. So that's a wrap. Anything you want to, where can they find you? Anything you want to drop before we head off?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Ethan Parker. So it's just the / is Ethan L. Parker. So find me there. I connect with pretty much all the requests I get, unless you're trying to sell me leads. And you can also check out my podcast. So it's the Revenue Podcast. His episode just dropped today. Probably not when you're listening to this, but last week probably. Whenever you listen to this, but it just dropped out, so go check that out. Hear us jam on a few of these things too. And if you're a company looking to level up your outbound motion, you need some help building out SDRs, or your AEs need some work, shoot me an email. It's ethan@altisales.com.
Sweet. And I'll put your LinkedIn and podcast information on the description of the episode.
Awesome.
Thanks,
man.